The most expensive thing in a restaurant is not the food. It is the moment you realize you cannot afford to be there. Olivia Bennet stood motionless on the sidewalk across from Bellamy's Steakhouse, staring at the 4 $1 bills folded neatly inside her wallet. $4. That was all she had. The glowing sign above the restaurant entrance reflected against the evening rain that had recently fallen across downtown Chicago. Luxury cars lined the curb. Men in tailored suits stepped through the front doors. Women wearing elegant dresses laughed beneath the warm lights shining from inside. Olivia looked down at her simple navy blouse and carefully pressed skirt. She had spent nearly 20 minutes deciding what to wear. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she wanted to look respectable. She closed her wallet slowly. The $4 were not what worried her most. A few minutes earlier, her phone had vibrated with a message from the hospital. Her mother's follow-up appointment had been moved forward. Additional tests were needed. More paperwork. More expenses. More uncertainty. Olivia slipped the phone back into her purse and took a deep breath. For a moment, she considered turning around and going home. Nobody would blame her. The blind date had been arranged by a coworker who insisted she deserved a chance to meet someone. Olivia had resisted for weeks. Between work, bills, and caring for her mother, dating felt like a luxury she could not afford. Yet somehow she had allowed herself to be convinced. Just one dinner, her coworker had said. Just one evening to think about something other than responsibilities. Olivia crossed the street and approached the restaurant entrance. The scent of expensive food drifted through the air as a doorman greeted arriving guests. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across polished wood and white tablecloths. A pianist played softly in the corner. Everything about the place felt elegant. Everything about the place reminded Olivia that she did not belong there. The hostess smiled politely. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" Olivia nodded. "Olivia Bennet." The hostess checked a tablet and returned the smile. "Right this way." Olivia followed her through the dining room. She noticed the prices displayed on a nearby menu. One steak cost $68. A seafood entree cost $74. Her stomach tightened. $4. She suddenly became painfully aware of the thin wallet resting inside her purse. At the far side of the restaurant, a man was already seated at a table for two. Jason Reed. Her blind date. He looked up as she approached. For a brief second, his eyes scanned her clothes before returning to her face. It was subtle, but Olivia noticed. Years of living on the edge of financial hardship had taught her to recognize judgment when it appeared. She offered a polite smile anyway. "Hi, Jason." He stood and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." Olivia sat down across from him. Around them, conversations filled the room. Glasses clinked. Waiters moved gracefully between tables. Everything seemed normal. Yet just 3 tables away, a man in a tailored charcoal suit had quietly looked up from his business dinner. Ethan Sinclair, the son of one of the city's wealthiest families, had not intended to pay attention to the woman at the nearby table. But something about the nervous way she carefully folded her menu and glanced at her purse made him look twice. And within the next hour, he would witness something that would completely change the course of both their lives. Olivia had learned long ago that embarrassment came in many forms. Sometimes it arrived as an overdue bill. Sometimes it arrived as a phone call from a collection office. And sometimes it arrived disguised as a leather-bound menu in a restaurant where every entree cost more than a week's worth of groceries. She kept her smile steady as Jason casually flipped through the menu. "This place has amazing steaks," he said. "You have to try one." Olivia glanced at the prices again and quietly closed the menu for a moment. "Everything looks nice," she replied. Jason leaned back in his chair. "So what do you do?" The question seemed harmless enough. "I work as an administrative assistant at a community health center." "That sounds busy." "It is." Olivia smiled. "But I like helping people." Jason nodded politely before taking a sip of water. "And what about your family?" For a brief moment, Olivia thought about her mother. She pictured the small apartment they shared. The medicine bottles lined up neatly beside the kitchen counter. The extra shifts she picked up whenever another bill arrived. "It is just my mom and me," she said. "She means everything to me." Jason's expression remained pleasant, but something felt distant about it. Like he was collecting information rather than getting to know a person. "What does your father do?" "He is not in our lives." "I see." He quickly returned to the menu. The conversation drifted towards safer topics. Movies. Restaurants. Travel. Yet Olivia noticed a pattern. Every subject eventually returned to money. Jason talked about investment accounts, luxury vacations, new developments downtown. He described people according to their income, neighborhoods according to property values, and success according to material possessions. Olivia listened respectfully. She had no desire to argue. But the more he spoke, the more she realized they viewed the world very differently. 3 tables away, Ethan Sinclair quietly reviewed financial projections with a business partner. At least that was what he was supposed to be doing. Instead, his attention kept drifting toward the young woman seated across the room. Not because she was demanding attention. Quite the opposite. There was something unusual about the way she carried herself. Most people trying to impress a date exaggerated their accomplishments. Olivia did the opposite. She spoke with honesty. She listened carefully. She thanked the waiter every time he approached the table. Small details. Easy to miss. Yet Ethan noticed them. Meanwhile, the dinner continued. Jason ordered an expensive appetizer without asking whether Olivia wanted one. He selected a bottle of sparkling water. Then he recommended one of the restaurant's premium entrees. Olivia chose the least expensive item she could find. Even then, the price made her stomach tighten. As the evening progressed, she found herself calculating numbers in her head. Hospital expenses. Rent. Utilities. Transportation. The figures never stopped. They followed her everywhere. At one point, her phone vibrated softly inside her purse. She glanced down and saw another message from the hospital portal. Her heart sank. Additional testing had been approved. Additional costs would follow. She quickly locked the screen and returned her attention to the table. Jason did not notice. Ethan did. The brief shadow that crossed her face lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet something about it stayed with him. This was not the expression of someone worried about a date. It was the expression of someone carrying responsibilities far heavier than herself. Outside, rain tapped gently against the restaurant windows. Inside, crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm golden light. The evening should have felt elegant. Instead, an invisible tension was slowly building. Olivia did not know it yet, but the most difficult moment of the night was still ahead of her. And when it arrived, it would reveal far more about her character than any conversation ever could. Across the restaurant, Ethan Sinclair tried to focus on the presentation open on his tablet. Numbers filled the screen. Market forecasts. Investment projections. Expansion opportunities. Normally, details like these held his full attention. Tonight they barely registered. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted back toward Olivia's table. He could not explain why. Chicago was full of beautiful people, ambitious people, and interesting people. He met dozens every week. Yet there was something different about the young woman seated across from Jason Reed. It was not her appearance, though she was certainly attractive in a quiet, understated way. It was the way she carried herself. The way she listened more than she spoke. The way she seemed completely unaware that anyone was watching. Ethan had spent most of his life surrounded by people trying to impress someone. Investors trying to impress executives. Executives trying to impress board members. Socialites trying to impress each other. Olivia seemed interested in none of that. At one point, the waiter accidentally knocked a spoon from a nearby table. Before anyone else reacted, Olivia leaned over, picked it up, and handed it back with a warm smile. The gesture lasted only seconds. Most people never noticed. Ethan did. A few minutes later, an elderly woman at a neighboring table struggled to reach her purse after it slipped beneath her chair. Again, Olivia was the first person to help. She excused herself politely, retrieved the purse, and returned to her seat without making a scene. The older woman thanked her. Olivia simply smiled and returned to the conversation. No attention. No recognition. Just kindness. Ethan found himself wondering who she was. Meanwhile, Jason seemed increasingly interested in talking about himself. "I just upgraded to a penthouse last year," he said proudly. "Best decision I ever made." Olivia nodded politely. "That sounds exciting. The view is incredible. You can practically see the entire city." He laughed. "Although honestly, I am already looking for something bigger." Olivia smiled. "Bigger is not always better." Jason looked surprised. "Really? Sometimes having enough is enough." For the first time all evening, Ethan nearly smiled. It was a simple statement. Yet it carried more wisdom than many conversations he heard in executive boardrooms. Jason appeared less amused. "I guess that depends on your goals." "Maybe." Olivia took a sip of water. "Or maybe it depends on what makes you happy." The answer lingered between them. Jason quickly changed the subject. As the evening continued, Ethan noticed something else. Every time Olivia's phone lit up, concern flashed across her face. Not annoyance. Not distraction. Concern. Real concern. The kind carried by people responsible for someone other than themselves. Eventually, Jason excused himself to take a call near the entrance. As soon as he disappeared, Olivia released a slow breath she seemed to have been holding all night. Her shoulders relaxed. She opened her purse and quietly checked her wallet. Ethan happened to glance over at that exact moment. For $1 bills. Nothing else. No credit cards. No stack of cash. Just $4. Olivia quickly closed the wallet and looked around to make sure nobody had seen. Ethan immediately looked away. He felt as though he had witnessed something deeply private. Suddenly, the nervousness he had sensed all evening made perfect sense. The expensive menu. The careful choices. The constant calculations. She had walked into one of the most expensive restaurants in the city carrying only $4. Yet she had never once complained. Never once acted embarrassed. Never once asked anyone for help. When Jason returned, he seemed unaware of everything that had happened. The conversation resumed. The dinner moved forward. But Ethan's perspective had changed completely. He no longer saw a woman on an awkward blind date. He saw someone carrying invisible burdens with remarkable grace. And before the night was over, he was about to discover that the truth behind Olivia Bennett's life was far more extraordinary than he ever imagined. By the time the entrees arrived, Olivia had already reached a quiet conclusion. Jason was not a bad person. He was simply a person who measured the world differently than she did. To him, success seemed to be something displayed. A larger apartment. A more expensive watch. A better table at a restaurant. Olivia had spent most of her life measuring success another way. A month with all the bills paid. A healthy report from her mother's doctor. A little extra money left over at the end of the week. Different worlds. Different priorities. Jason cut into his steak and smiled. "So where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Olivia thought about the question carefully. "Hopefully helping more people." Jason laughed lightly. "That is a very noble answer. It is an honest one. You do not want to start your own business? Buy property? Build wealth?" Olivia smiled. "Those things are fine. But they are not the first things I think about." "Really? Really?" She glanced toward the rain-streaked window. "My mom spent most of her life taking care of other people. I would like the chance to take care of her someday." For a brief moment, genuine silence settled over the table. Ethan happened to hear those words from across the room. They landed harder than he expected. Because unlike many people who talked about family values, Olivia spoke as though she lived them every day. Jason eventually shrugged. I guess we all have different goals. The conversation continued, but something had shifted. Olivia could feel it. The connection her friends had hoped for simply was not there. She remained polite, kind, respectful. Yet she increasingly felt like a guest observing someone else's life rather than sharing her own. Then the waiter returned carrying dessert menus. Would either of you care for dessert this evening? Jason barely looked up. No, thank you. Olivia smiled politely. I am fine as well. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Several minutes later, the check arrived in a black leather folder. The simple object immediately transformed the atmosphere. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Not because she expected to pay. Jason had invited her. Common courtesy suggested he would handle the bill. Still, the sight of that folder reminded her how fragile her situation truly was. $4. If anything unexpected happened, she had almost no margin for error. Jason glanced toward the folder, and then suddenly checked his phone. His expression changed. Excuse me for a second. He stood quickly. I need to take this call. Olivia nodded. Of course. Jason walked toward the entrance with his phone pressed against his ear. Minutes passed. Olivia sipped water and waited. 5 minutes became 10. The waiter passed by twice. The folder remained unopened. Olivia glanced toward the front doors. Jason was nowhere in sight. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Across the room, Ethan noticed it too. His business partner had long since left. Yet Ethan remained seated, quietly observing. He watched Olivia check the time. He watched her look toward the entrance again. He watched uncertainty slowly replace patience. 15 minutes passed. Then Olivia's phone vibrated. She looked down at the screen. A text message from Jason. Sorry. I do not think we are a match. Something came up. Good luck. That was it. No apology for leaving. No explanation. No mention of the bill sitting on the table between them. Olivia stared at the message for several seconds. The restaurant suddenly felt much larger. Much quieter. The warm lights seemed harsher somehow. Around her, conversations continued normally. Nobody knew what had just happened. Nobody except Ethan. Slowly, Olivia lowered the phone and looked at the black leather folder. Her breathing remained calm. Her expression remained composed. But inside she was calculating. She knew exactly how much money sat inside her wallet. She knew exactly how much dinner at this restaurant cost. And she knew that in the next few minutes, she would have to make a choice that would reveal more about her character than anyone in the room could possibly imagine. Olivia sat alone for several seconds after reading the message. The restaurant continued moving around her as though nothing unusual had happened. Waiters carried trays. Guests laughed over dessert. Glasses clinked softly beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Yet at her table, everything had changed. She looked once more at the empty chair across from her. Then she folded her phone, placed it carefully inside her purse, and took a slow breath. No anger crossed her face. No tears appeared in her eyes. Only disappointment. Quiet disappointment. The black leather folder remained unopened beside her plate. Olivia knew exactly what waited inside. A number she could not pay. For a brief moment, she considered calling a friend. She considered calling her coworker who had arranged the date. She even considered calling her mother. But each option disappeared as quickly as it arrived. Her mother already carried enough worries. Olivia would not add another one. Slowly, she opened the folder. The total stared back at her. The amount was more than she had expected. Her stomach tightened, but her expression never changed. Across the room, Ethan watched carefully. Most people in her position would have panicked. Some would have argued. Others might have walked away and left the problem for someone else. Olivia did none of those things. Instead, she reached into her purse and removed her wallet. For $1 bills rested inside exactly where she had left them. Ethan felt something twist inside his chest. Seeing the reality was somehow different from imagining it. $4. That was all she had. Yet even now, she sat with dignity. Olivia closed the wallet and signaled politely for the waiter. A young man approached with a professional smile. Is everything all right this evening? Olivia nodded. Actually, I need to speak with a manager, if possible. The waiter seemed surprised but remained courteous. Of course. A few minutes later, the restaurant manager arrived. Olivia stood immediately. I am very sorry, she said quietly. The person who invited me to dinner left unexpectedly. I cannot cover the full bill tonight. The manager's expression became cautious. Olivia continued before he could respond. I am not asking for anything free. I can leave identification. I can come back tomorrow. If necessary, I am willing to work to repay what I owe. I just want to handle this responsibly. Ethan stared. The manager stared. Even a nearby waiter paused. There was something extraordinary about hearing those words spoken without self-pity. Olivia was embarrassed, certainly. But she was not looking for rescue. She was looking for accountability. The manager softened slightly. Miss, that will not be necessary. It is, Olivia replied gently. I ordered the meal. I am responsible for my part. The sincerity in her voice left no room for doubt. For the first time all evening, Ethan pushed his chair back. He had witnessed enough. Yet he did not move toward her immediately. Instead, he found himself wondering how a person carrying so little could possess so much character. Money had surrounded Ethan his entire life. He had seen wealthy people argue over trivial expenses. He had seen executives avoid responsibility for major mistakes. Yet here stood a young woman with $4 in her wallet volunteering to repay a debt she had not even created. The manager seemed uncertain how to respond. Olivia reached into her purse again and placed the 4 bills carefully on the table. It is not much, she said softly. But it is what I have right now. The sight nearly broke Ethan's heart. Not because of the money itself. Because of what it represented. Every dollar mattered to her. Every dollar probably had another purpose waiting at home. Yet she offered it without hesitation. Because it was the right thing to do. At that moment, Ethan understood something important. The most valuable person in the restaurant was not sitting at the most expensive table. She was standing beside a bill she could not afford, choosing integrity when nobody would have blamed her for walking away. And Ethan suddenly knew he could not remain a silent observer any longer. The manager looked down at the $4 bills resting on the table and then back at Olivia. For a moment, he seemed unsure what to say. Years of working in an upscale restaurant had exposed him to every type of customer imaginable. He had seen wealthy guests argue over minor charges. He had seen people invent excuses to avoid responsibility. But he had never seen someone offer everything she had while asking only for the opportunity to make things right. Miss, he said gently, please have a seat. We can figure something out. Olivia nodded gratefully. Thank you. She sat down, but her shoulders remained tense. The problem was still there. Across the room, Ethan finally stood. He walked toward the table with calm confidence, drawing only a few curious glances from nearby guests. Olivia noticed him approaching and immediately assumed he was part of the restaurant staff or perhaps someone connected to management. She had no idea who he really was. Ethan stopped beside the table. Excuse me, he said politely. Olivia looked up. Yes? I could not help overhearing part of the situation. Embarrassment immediately flashed across her face. I am sorry if I disturbed anyone. Ethan shook his head. You did not. His voice remained warm and respectful. Actually, I was impressed. Olivia blinked. That was the last word she expected to hear. Ethan glanced at the $4 bills. Most people spend their lives talking about responsibility. You are one of the few people I have seen actually practice it. Olivia looked away briefly. I am just trying to do the right thing. Even when it costs you? Ethan asked. Especially then. The answer came so naturally that Ethan almost smiled. There was no performance in her words. No attempt to appear noble. She simply believed what she was saying. The manager quietly stepped back, sensing that something important was unfolding. Ethan pulled out the empty chair across from Olivia and sat down. "May I ask you a question?" Olivia hesitated before nodding. "Sure. Why were you willing to offer your last $4? Olivia glanced at the money on the table. "Because it is what I owe. Even if those $4 matter to you?" A faint smile crossed her face. "They matter." Ethan studied her expression. "Then why not keep them?" Olivia thought for a moment. "Because keeping them would not let me sleep tonight." The simplicity of the answer hit Ethan harder than any business negotiation he had experienced that year. She was not calculating advantages. She was not protecting an image. She was protecting her conscience. For a few moments, neither spoke. The restaurant noise seemed distant somehow. Finally, Ethan leaned back slightly. "Would it make you uncomfortable if someone offered to help?" Olivia smiled politely. "It depends." "On what? Whether it is help or pity?" Ethan nodded slowly. That answer told him everything. She did not want to be rescued. She wanted to be respected. Most people never understood the difference. "Then let me be very clear," Ethan said. "I am not offering pity." Olivia looked at him carefully for the first time. Something about his calm confidence seemed familiar. "Who are you?" she asked. Ethan laughed softly. "That is usually the first question people ask me." Before he could answer, the manager approached holding a folder. "Mr. Sinclair," he said respectfully. "Everything is ready." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Sinclair. The name was impossible to miss in Chicago. The Sinclair family owned businesses, buildings, and charitable foundations throughout the city. Ethan noticed her reaction. "I promise that changes nothing about this conversation." But it changed everything inside Olivia's mind. Suddenly she understood why the staff seemed to recognize him. Why people occasionally glanced his way. Why he carried himself so comfortably. Yet despite all of that, he was sitting here talking to her as though she mattered. Ethan looked toward the manager, and then back at Olivia. "I would like to make you a proposal." Olivia felt her pulse quicken. "A proposal?" Ethan nodded. "Not about the bill." He paused. "About an opportunity." And for the first time that evening, Olivia realized this night might not end the way she thought it would. Olivia stared at Ethan for several seconds, unsure whether she had heard him correctly. An opportunity. The word felt strangely out of place after everything that had happened. Just 20 minutes earlier, she had been calculating how to repay a restaurant bill she could not afford. Now one of the most recognizable names in the city was sitting across from her talking about opportunities. "I am not sure I understand," she said carefully. Ethan nodded. "That is fair." He folded his hands on the table. "Then let me explain." The manager quietly excused himself, leaving them alone. Around them, dinner service continued as usual. Yet for Olivia, the restaurant suddenly felt very different. Ethan glanced at the $4 bills still resting on the table. "Most people think character reveals itself when life is easy," he said. "I think the opposite." Olivia listened silently. Anyone can be generous when they have plenty. Anyone can be responsible when the cost is small. But tonight you were willing to give everything in your wallet because you believed it was the right thing to do. Olivia looked down. It was only $4. "No," Ethan said gently. "It was everything you had." The distinction mattered. More than she wanted to admit. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan continued. "I own several community initiatives throughout the city. One of them partners with healthcare organizations." Olivia looked surprised. "Healthcare?" "Yes." Ethan smiled slightly. "Which is why I found it interesting that you work at a community health center." Olivia shifted in her seat. "It is not a glamorous job. The world needs people who care more about helping others than appearing glamorous." The answer caught her off guard. She was used to hearing people praise success. She was not used to hearing someone praise service. Ethan studied her expression. Can I ask you something? Olivia nodded. Why did you choose that work? She did not answer immediately. The truth felt personal. Yet something about Ethan's tone encouraged honesty. Because when my mother got sick, I spent a lot of time around people who helped us. Ethan remained silent. Olivia continued. Nurses, receptionists, counselors, people who treated us with dignity when life was difficult. Her voice softened. I wanted to do that for someone else. Ethan felt a quiet respect growing stronger with every answer. Your mother raised you well. Olivia smiled. She raised me alone. The words hung between them. Ethan could tell there was a larger story behind them. What does your mother do? He asked. Olivia hesitated before answering. She spent most of her life working as a housekeeper. Ethan nodded. That is honest work. I know. A trace of pride entered her voice. She worked in homes most people could never afford. She cleaned up after people who barely noticed she existed. Olivia looked toward the window. Rain still drifted softly against the glass. She taught me that a person's value is not determined by the room they stand in. Ethan felt those words settle deeply inside him. They sounded less like a lesson and more like a philosophy. Suddenly, many things made sense. The humility, the responsibility, the dignity she carried so naturally. They had been built over years of watching her mother sacrifice everything without asking for recognition. Your mother sounds remarkable, Ethan said. Olivia smiled. She is. Her phone vibrated again. For an instant, concern crossed her face. Ethan noticed it immediately. Is everything okay? Olivia glanced at the screen. The hospital. She quickly locked the phone. They are scheduling additional tests. Ethan understood now. The hospital messages. The financial stress. The quiet worries she carried throughout the evening. None of it had been about herself. And you are helping take care of her? He asked. Olivia nodded. I always will. Ethan leaned back slowly. Every answer confirmed what he had already begun to suspect. The woman sitting across from him possessed a level of integrity that could not be taught in business school or purchased with money. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a business card. He placed it gently on the table between them. Olivia looked down at it. Her eyes widened slightly. What she was reading had the potential to change everything. And for the second time that night, she realized the future might be arriving from the most unexpected direction imaginable. The business card remained on the table between them. Olivia stared at it as though it belonged to another world. Printed beneath Ethan Sinclair's name was the title of Executive Director of Community Partnerships for the Sinclair Foundation. She had heard of the foundation before. Almost everyone in Chicago had. The organization funded healthcare programs, educational initiatives, and community outreach projects throughout the city. Slowly, she looked up. Why are you giving this to me? Ethan smiled slightly. Because opportunities should be given to people who earn them. Olivia shook her head. You barely know me. That is true. Ethan leaned forward. But I know enough. He glanced toward the $4 still resting on the table. I know what you did when nobody thought anyone was watching. For a moment, Olivia could not find words. Throughout her life, people had noticed mistakes. People had noticed limitations. People had noticed what she lacked. Very few people had ever noticed her character. Ethan continued. Our foundation is launching a healthcare outreach initiative next month. We need someone who understands people. Someone who treats others with dignity. Someone who cares more about service than status. Olivia listened carefully. And you think that person is me? I do. The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. She had spent years doubting herself. Hearing someone speak with such confidence felt unfamiliar. The position comes with training, Ethan explained. Better pay than your current role. Growth opportunities. Full benefits. He paused briefly. And flexible scheduling if you need to help care for your mother. Olivia lowered her eyes. The offer sounded almost unreal. Yet what affected her most was not the salary or the title. It was the fact that someone had taken the time to see beyond her circumstances. I do not want special treatment, she said quietly. Ethan nodded immediately. Good. Olivia looked surprised. Ethan smiled. Because I am not offering special treatment. If you accept, you will earn everything that follows. Something inside her relaxed. For the first time all evening, she felt understood. The restaurant manager returned carrying a small document folder. Ethan accepted it and placed it beside the business card. What is that? Olivia asked. A receipt. For the dinner? Ethan nodded. The bill has been handled. Olivia immediately shook her head. No. Ethan almost laughed. Of all the responses he expected, refusal had not been one of them. No? I cannot let you do that. Why not? Because it is not my money. Ethan studied her for a moment before answering. Then consider it repayment. Olivia frowned slightly. Repayment for what? Ethan's expression softened. For reminding me that integrity still exists. The answer left her speechless. Around them, the restaurant continued operating normally, unaware that a life was quietly changing at one corner table. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. City lights reflected across wet streets like scattered stars. Ethan stood and placed the folder in front of her. Take some time to think about the position. You are assuming I will call. No. He smiled. I am hoping you will. Olivia laughed softly for the first time that night. The sound surprised even her. Ethan extended his hand. She stood and shook it. Thank you, she said. For seeing me. Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. The truth is, Olivia, you are impossible not to see. As she prepared to leave, her phone vibrated again. Another hospital message. She glanced down and opened it. This time her eyes widened. Ethan noticed immediately. Is everything all right? Olivia stared at the screen. The additional testing appointment. Her voice trembled slightly. A cancellation just opened. My mother can be seen tomorrow morning. Relief washed across her face. Weeks of uncertainty seemed to lift at once. Ethan smiled. Then maybe tonight was not entirely bad. Olivia looked toward the window, toward the city beyond. Toward possibilities she had not imagined when the evening began. And as she slipped the business card carefully into her purse, she realized that one unexpected dinner had become the beginning of a future she never saw coming. 1 year later, Olivia Bennett stood in front of a crowded conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. Morning sunlight poured through the glass walls, casting long reflections across polished floors and rows of occupied seats. Community leaders, healthcare professionals, volunteers, and city officials filled the room. Some reviewed notes. Others exchanged quiet conversations. But all eyes eventually settled on Olivia. The woman standing confidently at the front of the room looked very different from the nervous young woman who had once counted $4 inside a restaurant wallet. Yet in the ways that mattered most, she had not changed at all. She still carried herself with quiet humility. She still listened more than she spoke. And she still measured success by the lives she could help improve. The healthcare outreach program Ethan had offered her had become more than a job. It had become a mission. Over the past year, Olivia had helped expand community services into neighborhoods that previously lacked access to support. She had organized wellness events, coordinated volunteers, connected families with resources. Everywhere she went, people remembered one thing. She treated everyone with dignity. The same dignity she had once offered strangers despite carrying her own burdens. As the meeting concluded, applause filled the room. Several attendees approached to thank her. Others requested advice about future projects. Olivia accepted every compliment graciously, though praise still made her slightly uncomfortable. When the crowd finally dispersed, she gathered her notes and stepped into the hallway. A familiar voice greeted her immediately. I think you are becoming more popular than the foundation. Olivia laughed before turning around. Ethan Sinclair stood near the elevator holding 2 cups of coffee. That is definitely not true. That is exactly what someone popular would say. He handed her a cup. Olivia accepted it with a smile. Over the past year, their friendship had grown naturally. Not through dramatic moments or grand gestures, but through shared values and mutual respect. Ethan remained one of the busiest people in the city. Yet somehow he always found time to ask about Olivia's mother, her projects, and the communities she served. How did the meeting go? He asked. Better than I expected. Olivia glanced out the window toward the city skyline. We are opening 3 new support centers next quarter. Ethan smiled proudly. I knew you could do it. Olivia shook her head. We did it. Ethan looked at her for a moment. You still do that? Do what? Share credit for everything. Olivia laughed softly. Maybe because no one succeeds alone. The words reminded Ethan of the first night they met. The same perspective. The same character. Success had changed her circumstances without changing her values. Later that afternoon, Olivia drove across town to a quiet residential neighborhood. The trees were full of green leaves. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. Neighbors waved from front porches. It was the kind of neighborhood her mother had once dreamed about but never believed she would live in. Olivia parked in front of a small white house with blue shutters and a flower garden beside the walkway. Her mother sat on the porch reading a book. The additional medical testing from the previous year had led to treatment, recovery, and finally stability. For the first time in many years, the future no longer felt uncertain. You are home early, her mother said with a smile. The meeting ended ahead of schedule. Olivia joined her on the porch. Together they watched the afternoon sunlight settle across the neighborhood. For a while either spoke. The silence felt peaceful. Comfortable. Earned. Eventually her mother glanced toward her. Do you ever think about that dinner? Olivia laughed. More often than I should. Funny how life works. Olivia nodded. It was funny. One difficult evening. One humiliating moment. One choice to do the right thing when nobody expected it. That had been the turning point. Not because a billionaire's son appeared. Not because someone paid a bill. But because character had been revealed when circumstances were hardest. As the sun slowly lowered beyond the trees, Olivia thought about the $4 she once believed defined her situation. Looking back, she realized they had never defined her at all. They simply revealed who she already was. And sometimes, the greatest opportunities in life arrive not when someone notices how much money a person has, but when someone notices the values they refuse to abandon when they have almost none.